Hey kids, welcome to Stylish Rumble Harmony rigging and animation and stuff thing. It's been a while. I had a lot of work and I just didn't have time, man. Just no time for this. I seem to have gotten over the wave of work, so hopefully I can do something that's halfway useful for you guys tonight. I've just finished kind of mucking around with this guy here doing a little head turn, and it's not finished. It still leaves a lot to be desired. I wanted to go through the process of doing a little bit of animation and think about workflow and some of the things I do that speed up my process and make things more efficient for revisions and stuff like that. So instead of doing that and then recording something later, I just kind of did it and talked as I went. So this is a little bit of a disorganized video, just kind of in the ballpark of workflow, and I'm going to use it as a teaching tool for myself to talk about it more succinctly in the next couple videos. But I've recorded it anyway, so I could get something out for this week. So here it is. It's a little disorganized, but maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't. Who knows? Just go. I need the views. And the rig I've been making is still not totally done. I've got most of the major part of the rotation done, but he's still missing details like eyes. He doesn't have any blinks or anything yet. I have gotten the mouths started. There we go. We've got some 3/4 mouths. There you are. So I'm starting to get that stuff done, but I haven't got that rigged either. It's just flat mouths. And you can see if you do have one of these 360 rigs when you're switching back and forth between the side view and the 3/4 view, or the front to the mouth, you're going to get some weird stuff. So there's always that issue with these 360 rigs. But once it's completely done, I'm going to get all of this stuff totally rigged up, and then I'm going to put it up on Gumroad for free, and you can just download it and play with it if you have Harmony 14, because that's the one I'm using. Harmony Professional 14, whatever the one with the node view is. I don't remember what they call them all. And I'll do a rig overview once that's finished. But in the meantime, I just want to do some very basic character stuff, talking about workflow, using the node view for selecting as opposed to the timeline view, because that's something that's really underutilized. A lot of animators don't really even know what the node view does. They're a little afraid to go in there. They think it's more complicated than it is. So what I've done is, because we just went over the head turn, I've done a really shoddy storyboard of a little head turn. So fairly similar to what I covered in the horse video. I just kind of copied some of the poses, a little bit of an expression change. I didn't do too much with the hands or anything, and I might have to draw some eyes in because I didn't get it finished. I just wanted something simple that didn't have a lot of moving parts to talk about how to start animating. So the first thing I would do when I got this scene, I would probably have all the backgrounds and characters and stuff. And you might come in with this. Your storyboard would look probably a lot better than this, because I'm not a storyboard artist. You'd have a character there, and if it was a 360 rig, you'd have the full rotation. If you had a character rig that was each pose individually, or if you've rigged your own and you've decided to do individual poses because it's a lot simpler, you should have a number of different views in there. And the first thing I would do is add a master peg. So a scene peg, you could call it, or a master peg, and just something outside the group at the very top of the hierarchy. And turn off your keyframes mode. So this is going to affect all of the keyframes throughout. And then I'd scale my character up to the appropriate size to suit my storyboard. That seems close enough. Then, so now he's the right scale all the way across, and there's no big scale changes at all. So that's fine. The next thing I would do is add an extra peg to my storyboard. And the storyboard tends to come in as a PNG sequence, so all of your different drawings would be in along here just like it is now. You could lock it to make sure you don't mess it up. That's always a good plan. But I always add a peg in case I want to move it. In this case, I'm just going to move it off to the side and shrink it. So now if I need to double check my framing reference, I can deactivate the peg I've added if there's already some animation on it from another person before me that's adjusted the storyboard. I'm not going to affect that at all. This original peg is, I could lock that as well and keep it safe. And then I've got this peg that I can do whatever I want to keep it in the scene close to where I can see it. If I need to zoom in and I want to double check my expressions or something, I've got that without having to worry about breaking something else. The next thing I would do, and everybody has their own workflow, so this might not be what other people do. I'll take all the poses that I have given to me. In this case, it's just the rotation. I don't have any kind of flare poses. In some shows I've worked on, they had tons of different poses and stuff that had been used in previous episodes, and they collected the most useful ones, and they'd have them available on the timeline. So you might actually come in with 20 different poses if you're lucky, but oftentimes you just get the regular scenes. So I would extend my exposure beyond where my actual scene ends. If you have a storyboard, you can obviously see where your scene ends, but if not, you can add a drawing. Over here, you can call it notes, and you can just make a note that it's 60 frames long, and then when you're finished your scene, you could collapse it back down if that's something you need to do, depending on the way that each studio renders their stuff. Some studios, you could actually have your exposure extended and it won't render extra frames because the rendering farm is getting the information from somewhere else, but oftentimes it's taking it directly from the scene, and you need to make sure to recollapse your scenes once you're finished whatever you're doing. So I take all my poses and I just paste them here after the scene ends. And now I've got all the poses that my scene planner's given me preserved at the end of my animation. And when I collapse this down and then open it up again, they're still there. They're just hiding. In older versions of Harmony, they actually delete the frames when you collapse them, but for the latest couple versions that you be able to collapse them. And if you're using something really like antique, like Animate Pro 2, I still have license to that one, then you can't collapse them down without deleting these. So that's good to be aware of. But for the most part, if you're using anything at all that's recent, you're going to be able to collapse them down as you need them. Next thing, I look and see how many different poses I need. So here I have a front view. Here I have a 3/4 front view, and here I have a side view head, 3/4 body. So next thing I'm going to do is grab my front view and paste it in where I need it. So next we need a 3/4 view here in the scene. So I'm going to grab my 3/4 view here, and I'm going to paste it in where it hits the 3/4 view. Boop, boop. And then I'm going to need 3/4 view until I get that side head. And now what I can do is if I just want the side head, I can grab my head. So I'm hitting the face here, anywhere on the face, and I'm going to hit B to walk up the chain until I get the full head. And then I go over to my network view and I hit O, and it's going to center on my selection. I like going into the network view because now I'm sure I'm on the head peg. I'm not on the features peg. I'm not on the neck peg, and that may or may not be where I need it. I may want to take in the side neck as well. Let's take a look. Yeah, the side neck is a little bit different. It's got a taper, and then the front one's flat across, so I do need the neck. Right? Once I figured out exactly what I need to make it work, go to the neck frame here, and I copy that, and I make sure this is collapsed. If this is open, and you can see all your hair and stuff, then what you're going to do is copy this keyframe, and then paste this keyframe. It's not going to take the drawing of the neck or anything below it, so I need to make sure this is collapsed, and then grab it here, the side view, and figure out where I need it. There. That frame there, and then I can paste in the side head with the 3/4 body. So now, instead of trying to animate as I go along and then switch in views later, I've got this initial part done and I don't have to worry about it as we go along. We might have to muddle around with the transitions or something, but this way it saves any technical issues later with rotating the character, or if I deleted these somehow, I wouldn't have the poses I need. Next thing I'm going to do is start at the very highest part of my hierarchy. So here, the character is using the scene peg to establish the scale, and you could even have a scale peg and a translation peg separate up here if that's something that you feel like you might need. But don't be afraid to add additional pegs when you need to do this major stuff. Well, it seems a little unwieldy if you keep them named and you keep all of the information on the certain peg that you've been naming properly, then it's going to save you time. It's one of those things where you do more work now so that you do less work later. So the next thing I want to do is start at the highest part of my hierarchy and figure out what I need to do to get these poses. So in this, I do not need to animate this high on my hierarchy. I might want to add a little bit of a lean in his body if I want him to really look a bit more cranky because my storyboard is terrible. So I might want to jazz it up a bit. So I can grab this next highest one is my torso. All right, so I'm going to grab my torso peg and I'm going to do that first. So here I'm going to give him a little bit of a lean. And because this is controlling the upper body, the head and stuff, I am going to have to counter animate up here. But if I'd move the head first, and this is why you start high on the hierarchy, if I'd decided, okay, I wanted to have a little bit of a head tilt like this, and then I move the body, then my head is tilted too far, because I already would have had a head tilt had it just left it alone. But now I might actually want it to tilt this way instead, so now I'm animating the head twice. And it seems a little bit silly with this head example because it's not a big deal. But if you start with the hand and then you move the lower arm and then you move the upper arm and then you go back and, oh, the hand's too far now, and then you go, oh, the lower arm's not right. So, but if you start at the top, so here, I've done all this stuff at the lower arm, like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling this is great, but now I have to move the shoulder, and I can take a look at the shoulder, and it's a little bit of a complex shoulder. It's got a bunch of different pieces, so if I were to have to move this up now, I'm messing up the arm that I've just bothered with. So always start at the top. Here I need to move the shoulder first, then I'm gonna have to move the arm in, and the shoulder has an individual peg as well, in case you need a little bit of foreshortening, and it also has a deformer in it, so I can get these rounded shoulders if I want them. We'll say his arms resting on a table. I don't have a lot of hands in here, so you're gonna have to bear with me with my terrible hands. And now that my shoulder's in place, I can... So I get my guy into place. He needs to be a little bit bigger, because you shouldn't see his arms, because I don't want to deal with the hands. There we go. And now things like the eye, I'm going to select on a piece of the eye and I'm going to go into my node view. This is one of the places where it's really useful. So if I were to select the pupil, it's going to move the highlight, but if I were to select the highlight, it's not going to move the pupil. And then if I grab this pupil, I might not be on the exact peg I want. It really depends on the complexity of the eye. It isn't really a huge issue with these super simple eyes, but if you have something that has a pupil and two highlights, and then you've got like the iris here with all the like little details and stuff, and they've done way too much detail, and there's 5 or 6 pegs incorporated in here, you want to be sure that you have the pupil for both eyes. And if you're working in an efficient studio, and hopefully you are, then the pupils are going to be about the same place on both sides, and it's going to be on the same place on every single character. So, you know, you start to get familiar with exactly where in this map the pieces are, and you can go in here and make very complex selections much simpler. Something like these glasses, for example. If you have to select this little piece of the glasses, but it's the side view and it's not really visible, if you know that the bridge of the nose is in here, it's much simpler to select it out of there. So I'm going to grab my 2 pupils, boop, boop, move them. And then I don't have drawing substitutions for the eyes yet, so I'm going to have to do some quick drawing subs. So I'm going to add a new drawing because you always want to add a new drawing if you're putting in substitutions, even if you don't think you're going to use the one that's already there. You don't want to end up deleting something that you find out you need later. Oh, so I do have eyelids in here. What? Oh, that's cool. Okay, I have an eyelid on one side. I haven't finished the eye on the other side, so I'm just going to copy it and then add a drawing sub and then paste it right in there. 'Cause that's a super pro move. Eyebrows. So in this case, I don't have deformers on my eyebrows, but I want them. So I'm going to just quickly throw them in. And you should have learned how to do that in my other video if you haven't figured out how to do it already. Throw in a couple deformers. And now you can... Alright. So there we go. I'm feeling like this guy needs bigger eyebrows, which I'll probably add in before I finish this guy up. Not liking these pencil lines. So there's my first keyframe. My next one is just a simple expression change. So if I'd been sensible, what I could have done is keyframe the shoulders here before I raise them up because I need them down again. I want him to, instead of just his shoulders coming down, I actually want him to sit up a bit. So again, I'm going to start at the very top of the hierarchy that I want to move, which is again this chest. and I want to straighten him out. And I can use this guy here to like straighten it out properly, and then I want to move up the chain here. And always be working from the top of the hierarchy. So alright, so now I've got keyframe 1 and keyframe 2. And depending on how well the rig is set up, you may be able to just tween between them. Now you can see one eye has a drawing substitution and one has one actually has the sliding eyelid already put in. So you can definitely see the difference there. So because you've been working with the hierarchy, your stuff is going to tween fairly sensibly. Alright, so I'm going to pretend this is the next keyframe I actually want. I'm just going to adjust the pupils a little bit. Watching somebody actually set up keyframes is not super fun, but hopefully you've got the gist of it now, just starting at the very highest frame that you need, and then working your way down. And same with here, you'd start with the shoulder, this peg first, and then this peg, and then so starting with this peg first, and then if you are using your network, you can see, okay, I'm on the highest shoulder peg, then down here, I'm using the highest arm, lower arm, and the hand. Or if you decided, okay, I'm going to select this arm by selecting the hand and then walking up the chain using your B hotkey, learn your hotkeys, then you decided you needed to move the other arm. So many animators will shift select all the pieces, especially if they're coming from something like Flash, where this is not really a big deal. But if you look at my node view, you can see that here I'm only selecting on this upper arm peg, and over here I've selected all the drawings. And because the drawings will not take any translation information, because we've set it up so that the pegs are keeping all of this stuff, it's going to go straight up to the next thing in the group. So if you select your arm, select, you're going to be putting keys on this, and this. And that's one of the things that always tangles people up. So if you decide you're going to select through the node view, you could easily select the highest one for this one, and the highest one for this one. And now no matter what you do, you're putting your information on these pegs, and these ones are staying clean. For example, do the same thing, tweening like this. Boop. So I drag my guy up here, slide it over here. Now if I go to these guys, you can see the one that I've selected in pieces has the information on these 4 pegs instead of the upper arm peg. All right, so it may start tweening along where you expect it to do, but now if you need to add something down here on this lower arm, your pivot point is wrong because you've moved the lower arm from where it belonged, and you're not moving this pivot point, which is connected to this peg. This is where we start getting stuff like this, which you can see in my checklist is a big pet peeve of mine. And the reason you're getting this is because you've broken that joint. But if you're starting at the top of your hierarchy and then you're shimmying or doing whatever you need to do, you're not adding those subsequent pegs down here. And if you need to move this guy and the hand, and you select the hand and then walk up the hierarchy, or you actually go in here and make sure that you're connected on this arm peg, you're going to have the pivot point that you expect to have. And you're not going to end up breaking all your joints, and you're going to save yourself time counter animating those little finicky bits that you've been mucking around with. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, it's taking forever. The thing I want you to take away from this video is keeping your reference keys at the end of your scene so that you can copy and paste them in. Starting at big and going small. So starting by adding some scene pegs. If you need a walk peg, put in a walk peg just for the translation. Keeping those separate is going to save you a lot of time if you need to do revision. So if you had the scale and the translation on the same peg, and then you got a revision that you needed them to walk faster because you're getting a little bit of skating or something, then having to battle some other keys on 2 different pegs, it's going to waste time adding these extra keys in here for those big movements. are going to give you more flexibility when you're doing revisions and save you time in the long run. Starting by adding your big poses and the actual rotations and stuff in at the very beginning. So instead of starting on frame 1 and deciding the best course of action for frame 1 and then moving on, check out your whole scene, put in your front view, your side view, your 3/4 view on the appropriate frames as you need them. Then seeing how they tween from one another and how much difficulty you're actually going to have there, and then working from the highest point down. So you're going to start here and get your torso in place before you set the arms, so that you don't set an arm first and then have to change it again once you've moved him over here. And now you're like, oh, well, I didn't have that move far enough, so I have to change it. Just doing that is going to save you little bits of time as you go, because now I'd have to redesign this whole shoulder, and doing it twice is it's just such a waste of time. Okay. Also, selecting from the top of your hierarchy and keeping an eye on those things in your node view, it's going to prevent you from selecting 4 different pegs like this and then having your shoulder get out of joint. Or if you select these 2 guys and then move this and move this, now your joint that the rigger spent so much time setting up is broken. So you're going to get these ugly elbows, and you're going to spend unnecessary time going in and trying to fix that joint, when had you just left it where it needed to be, it would rotate and you'd have nice clean roundy elbows. Hopefully that made sense. I know it wasn't super organized. Hopefully some of this will help you with your workflow a little bit. But even if this episode doesn't make any sense, I think it's given me an idea of what I need to do to create a better lesson plan for doing character stuff in the future. But in the meantime, like, share, subscribe, all things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video.